So, good morning to you all. This is the Cobh Heritage Museum here in Cobh. I'm just going to go in here now and have a look around. So I'm just looking at the advertising they have on the walls here. So it's all about, it's called the Cobh Heritage Centre, the Queenstown story. See, you must remember that Cobh was called Queenstown when the British ruled Ireland. So there's a restaurant in it, there's genealogical research, retail area, bureau de change, disabled facilities. So Cobh Heritage Centre, the Queenstown story, Titanic disaster, great loss of life. 40,000 Irish men and women sent to Australia as convicts. Ships sailed from Cobh directly to Australia. So people probably left Ireland during the famine times. Failure of the potato crop and disease ravages the country. And then between 1815 and 1970, 3 million emigrated from Queenstown. And the Lusitania sunk. 1,198 die as Lusitania is torpedoed off the Irish coast. So, as I said, the Lusitania was a British cruise ship and it was torpedoed by a German U-boat 11 miles off the head of Kinsale, which is also in Cork but further out, say in that direction there. I don't know how far from Cobh, but off the coast anyway. It was heading to America and they got torpedoed. It was in 1915, I think. So I'm just waiting for this place to open now, just to go inside. So this is a sculpture of this woman here, was Annie Moore. So Annie Moore was the first Irish immigrant to be processed on Ellis Island in New York in 1892. So that's why the sculpture is here. So I think it's time to go in now. So this is that woman, the sculpture outside. On January the 1st, 1892, Annie Moore, she was only a 15-year-old girl from County Cork, Ireland, made headlines as the first immigrant to be processed at Ellis Island. She is honoured by statues on both sides of the Atlantic at Ellis Island, National Monument, New York Harbour, and at the Cobh Heritage Centre, Cobh, County Cork. That's amazing here, look. That's amazing, right? This is a poster looking for navvies, which would be basically labourers that with shovels, using shovels and picks in America. 3,000 navvies in America on the 2nd division of the Oregon Short Line Railroad. So it was obviously the railroad. Wages was 7 cents per day, right? And the fare via Queenstown to New York, which was Cobh area, was £10, 3 shillings, which would have been a hell of a lot of money back then. So that's an ancient map of Ireland. It just says the remarkable genealogical or family map of Ireland, which shows the locations and lineages of the principal old native Irish family names. Oh, so in 1620, the first 200 Irish political prisoners are transported to Virginia. That's obviously one of the ships you would go to America. So in 1636, the Abraham, which was a ship, left Kinsale. On 28th of April 1636, Captain Joseph West sailed into Kinsale aboard the Abraham on a mission to procure voluntary indentured labour for the plantations in Virginia. To his dismay, most of the available indentured labour had already been procured just a few days before his arrival. The rival ship had set sail with between 120 and 140 passengers. This made it very difficult for West to find willing passengers for the journey. He sent out word that anyone who wished to go as servants to Virginia should meet him at Kinsale. The response was disappointing. It was obvious to West that he would not fill his quota of voluntary labour, so in desperation he hired agents to move inland and procure labourers by any means. This did not discount kidnap, which most likely happened. One of these agents was called Thomas Buckley, who was paid a pint of wine and some sugar for every person procured. After many months at anchor, West had eventually reached a satisfactory number of people for indentured labour in Virginia. Having obtained food and clothing, they set sail for America, but due to damage sustained on the voyage, West realised he would not make it to Virginia. Instead, they headed for Barbados, where it took only 2 days to sell the servants. Wow. There's pictures of the Titanic. Between the 1640s and the 1650s, Spike Island, the earliest account of Spike being used as a prison was during Cromwell's campaign in Ireland in the 1640s. It was used as a temporary holding centre for thousands of Irish people who were shipped off to America and the West Indies, most of whom went to Barbados, Montserrat or Antigua. Many of them would have spent the remainder of their lives as servants. During the later years of transportation in the 1800s, Spike was used to hold males only, but during the Cromwellian transportations, a huge number of women and children were transported too. As such, it is likely that men, women and children were all kept on Spike Island. In many cases, no crime had been committed to warrant transportation. People were literally kidnapped by man-catchers who received £4 for every person successfully captured and transported. It was an effort to ethnically cleanse the Irish population. It is thought that as many as 50,000 men, women and children were sold to plantations in the Americas between 1652 and 1659. Some believe the figure to be much higher, as Cromwell managed to reduce the Irish population by more than 500,000, most of whom were murdered or suffered from starvation and disease in the wake of genocide. Wow, I did not know that. That's really interesting there. Right, so 1700s, the Carolinas, that's in America, of course, as well. Anne Bonny Nee McCormick, a Kinsale native, was born around the year 1700 in the old head of Kinsale to lawyer William McCormick and his servant woman Mary Brennan. They sailed out of Cork to the Carolinas when Anne was young to escape persecution. They eventually purchased a plantation there. Anne had red hair and was known to have a fiery temper, having badly beaten a boy who would have lain with her against her will when she was just 13, and allegedly setting fire to her father's plantation after he disowned her for marrying a seaman by the name of James Bonny. Anne and James moved to Nassau in the Bahamas, which was known to be a haven for pirates at the time. Anne eventually met another pirate by the name of John Calico Jack Rackham, who captained a ship called the Revenge. She divorced James Bonny and married Rackham. By this point, she was fully immersed in the pirate world, and with her husband and the crew of the Revenge, she helped to capture and raid many vessels around the Jamaican coast for a time. Wow. So we had our own homemade pirate from Kinsale. That's come back in the 1700s. So she was divorced in the 1700s and was a pirate. I remember reading about the coffin ships. So it's saying here, Irish emigration reached unprecedented proportions during the famine. I think the famine was between 1845 and 1849. As people fled from hunger and disease, such was the demand for ships that many leaking and unseaworthy vessels were used, many of which never reached their destinations. They acquired the grim title of coffin ships. Many famine emigrants went initially to British North America, now Canada, because of fare structures and government regulations, but the majority subsequently settled in the United States. Wow. There's a replica of one of the ships. It's very, very good. Look down at the port, all the people and you see the horses and the wagons. Really good. So the impact of this new potato blight was catastrophic. Hunger and desperation forced thousands into the overcrowded workhouses and put enormous pressure on relief schemes which attempted to alleviate their distress. Over 750,000 people died during the famine, mainly from diseases such as cholera. Escape was seen by many as the only chance for survival. Between 1845 and 1851, over 1.5 million people emigrated from Ireland. This was more than had left the country in the previous half century. The problem was the total dependence on the potato by the poorest families. When it failed, they starved. No particular concern was felt in 1845 when the crop again failed in some areas through the ravages of a new fungus. In 1846, the potato crop failed completely, leaving thousands without food to sustain them, or seed potatoes to plant the following year. 1847 to 1849 saw either total or partial failures of whatever potato crop could be planted. Wow. The Great Famine was arguably the single greatest disaster in Irish history. It was caused by a disease known as blight, which affected Ireland's potato crop and rendered the country's main food source inedible. A period of mass starvation and emigration followed. Yeah, that's a big topic here in Ireland, the potato famine of 1845, 1846. So, a lot of Irish people ended up in Australia as convicts. So in 1791 here, a saint of a ship called the Queen set sail for Sydney with 159 convicts on board. And from 1823 to 1828, the surprise prison hulk is moored at Cobh. Following the American War of Independence, the transportation of convicts to the American colonies became impossible. The British now needed to find a new territory to send their unwanted prisoners to. Legislation was passed in 1790 that enabled the transportation of convicts to penal colonies in New South Wales, Australia. The Sheriff of Cork City, Henry Brown Hayes, was charged with organising the first transportation ship to Australia. In March 1791, the Queen, a small three-mast ship, was selected for the journey. She was commanded by Captain Richard Owen and sailed from Cobh with 155 convicts and 4 children crammed on board. So this model ship here was constructed for the film Far and Away in 1992 with Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. So this was the first ship to cross the Atlantic Ocean entirely under steam power, 703 tons. The Sirius, S-I-R-I-U-S, that right, the Sirius or Sirius, 178 feet long, wooden paddle steamer with 2-cylinder engine, built in 1837 for 27,000. Imagine that. Bigger and better. So the Titanic ship. So that's them building the Titanic in Belfast. If you're in Ireland and you're way into the Titanic and the whole disaster of the Titanic, I'd suggest you go visit the Titanic Museum in Belfast. It's more comprehensive and it's fantastic. This here is brilliant. It's got great pictures here. So this is a man called Frank Brown. He must have been a photographer who took these pictures in Cobh, which was then called Queenstown. So look, these were Frank Brown photographs of tugs at the bow of Titanic with the stern of New York in the distance. So obviously, see, so the Titanic anchored just at the mouth of Cobh Harbour here. So the anchor is being raised for the last time before it goes across the Atlantic Ocean. So when the Titanic arrived here in Queenstown, which is present-day Cobh, on the 11th of April in 1912, there were 123 passengers waiting to board the new liner. They were leaving Ireland for very varied reasons. Most were emigrants joining relatives or friends already in America. Mary McGovern from Bombay, County Cavan, was travelling to her cousin in New York. Another emigrant, John Meehan from Curry, County Sligo, intended to join his sister, Nora, in Chicago. Other Titanic passengers had emigrated in earlier years and were returning to America after visiting relatives in Ireland. Julia Barry was going back to New York, having nursed her dying mother near Farranfore in County Kerry. Another traveller, Thomas McCormick, had spent some time with his parents in Ballinamuck, County Longford, and was returning to New Jersey. So you don't know whether any of those passengers there died. I'm sure they did on the Titanic. So those were the tender boats or ships that brought the people out to the ferries or to the cruise liners. Oh, there's a fantastic model of the Titanic, look. Fantastic. So this is saying luxury on the Lusitania. So the Lusitania, unfortunately, was a luxury British cruise ship that was torpedoed 11 miles off the coast of Kinsale here in Cork in 1915 by a German U-boat. And well over 1,000 people died on that. So that was the cutlery there that was on board the if you were lucky enough to be, or unlucky enough to be on those cruise ships. So I don't know if you can see that there. That's the Lusitania there, right? And there's obviously a replica, or a model, should I say, of the German U-boat that sank the Lusitania. Torpedoed off Cork Harbour without warning, nearly 1,500 people drowned. Sinks in 20 minutes. Appalling spectacle. Rush to rescue, saving survivors. Queenstown scenes, thrilling interviews. So there you go. The SS Lusitania, the Cunard line, torpedoed and sunk by U-boat U-20 off the Cork coast on the 7th of May 1915. With the loss of 1,198 lives. Imagine it sank in 20 minutes. You would have no chance, would you? There's an artist's impression of the doomed Lusitania, look. Wow. So it was 10 miles, some say 11, it doesn't matter anyway, 10 miles off the old head of Kinsale, 25 miles west of present day, it's called Queenstown, but Cobh. Of the 1,959 people on board, 1,198 died. Those who survived were brought to Cobh and Kinsale by rescue vessels and cared for in local hotels and hospitals. Many of those who died were buried at Old Church Cemetery, 2 miles north of Queenstown, which is Cobh. Wow. This is survivors from the Lusitania disaster at Queenstown railway station on May 1915. Dogs not permitted in passenger accommodation, kennels provided.
From busy port to leisure port, from active to recessionary times, this town has experienced life in all its aspects. Here is Jack Doyle, one of Cobh's most renowned celebrities. Fine figure of young manhood. He is a top boxer and acclaimed actor.
White Star Fleet Titanic, world's largest ocean liner at the time. Length 882.5 feet. Beam 92.5 feet. 45,000 tons. Departs April the 10th, 1912. Do not delay. Secure your tickets through agents. Wow. Right, well that was really well worth a visit. The Cobh Heritage Centre. Excellent. Lots and lots of great information here. So if you're in Cobh, definitely check out the Cobh Heritage Centre. You won't be disappointed.